Welcome to the second tutorial about the Blackbox Simulation Airbus A320 for Flight Simulator X. We're still here at Innsbruck Airport. We have completed our cockpit preparation and the engine start in this Airbus A320. We are now ready for taxi. There's no pushback required at this position, so we can turn right out. So after we've received our taxi clearance, we switch the runway turn-off lights and taxi lights to on. Release the parking brake. Check if left and right sides are clear. I'll also switch the steering tiller on here in the simulation. We'll just add a small amount of power, just enough to start moving. And you can use the steering tiller and nose wheel steering to make this pretty tight turn here. And taxi to the holding point, runway 08, via taxiway Alpha. First thing to do is the brakes check. So you just apply brakes and then check on the triple indicator here if the pressure of the alternate braking system stays at 0. Next check is the flight controls. In reality, you just have to move the side stick to bring up the flight control page, but of course you can also do it manually by pressing the flight control push button. Now we have the flight control position indicated on the system display. We move the side stick fully back and up and check if the elevator goes full up, full down, and then back to neutral. Same with the aileron, full left, full right, and back to neutral. Then you should also check the rudder. For this you have to push the disconnect switch on the steering tiller to disconnect the rudder from the nose wheel steering. And then you can safely check the rudder by moving it full left and full right and checking the indications. Now when the captain has finished, the co-pilot is doing the same with the elevator and the ailerons. And spoilers, of course. Now somewhere during taxi, when you've left the apron, you should do the taxi flow, switching on the weather radar, checking on the navigation display if it's actually working. Then check if the transponder is set to the correct code and mode. Arming the auto brake in the max mode, so in case that you have a rejected takeoff, that you have full braking. Then when also the cabin is ready, you can push the takeoff config push button to check the takeoff memo if you have only green indications, but it seems we forgot to switch the no smoking sign on. So now the takeoff memo shows all green except the takeoff config test, which you do by pushing the takeoff config push button. And now if the takeoff memo only contains green items, the signs on, cabin ready, spoilers arm, flaps takeoff, auto brake max, and a takeoff configuration normal, then you're ready for departure. That's a good point to do the before takeoff checklist down to the line. Check if you have done the flight control check, if the flight instruments are set, that the ATC clearance and briefing is verified with the altitude to climb and the clear departure route. Check you have set the flap setting to the correct configuration that you have calculated in your takeoff performance software. In our case it's configuration 3, and then check all the V-speeds and the flex temperature if you're using assumed temperature, or if not, if it's actually set to takeoff go around thrust toga. Now we have received our lineup clearance to line up backtrack runway 08. Now we have to check that the stop bar lights at the holding point are turning green, which they do now, so we can cross the stop bar after having received our clearance, and we'll proceed now to lining up and backtracking runway 08. Switch on the strobe lights and the landing lights, and we set the nose light to the takeoff position. Transponder, or the TCAS actually, is set to TARA now. And then when everything's done, you can perform the before takeoff checklist below the line. But let's do this tight turn at the end of the runway first. Try to use the full runway length as much as possible. So the runway is not too long in Innsbruck, about 2,000 meters. Let's stop here for a second and do the rest of the before takeoff checklist. So we check that on the takeoff memo we have takeoff no blue, so all green. We have confirmed the takeoff runway 08 by checking also the heading and the markings on the runway. I've advised the cabin crew of the impending departure. We have set the TCAS to TARA. The engine mode selector stays in the normal position for this takeoff, and the packs remain on. So the before takeoff checklist is complete. Now I've also received a takeoff clearance. So let's start the clock. Then move the thrust levers to the MCD, the max continuous. To the flex detent, of course, because we're using an assumed temperature of 48 degrees. So on the PFD you have indicated now man flex 48. We've released the brakes now. Speed is rising. At 100 knots we compare the airspeed indicators. 100 knots, checked. Then it's V1, rotate. Get the nose up at about the rate of 2.5 degrees per second. When we have positive climb, gear up. Just follow the flight director commands. The SRS speed reference mode is now guiding you in pitch. I'll switch on the autopilot 1 and check the indication on the PFD, so it's active now. and the lateral mode is navigation, so it's following the FMC route. We're reaching now our thrust reduction altitude. It's asking us now to move the thrust lever to climb, so that's what we do. Move it back to the climb detent. So we have now set climb power and the mode is thrust climb and the A thrust is active. Now we're waiting for the acceleration altitude, which is 5,000 feet as set in the FMC. When we reach 5,000 feet, the pitch mode will automatically change to climb, which you can see now. And we have altitude in blue, so altitude acquire mode flight level 120 is armed. Nose is coming down now to accelerate. And as soon as the speed is above F speed and rising, we can retract flaps to configuration 1. Let's also check if we're actually moving to the desired position. As soon as speed has reached S speed and is accelerating, we can retract the flaps slats to up. Takes quite a while here now, so just admire the scenery in the meantime. This departure route is actually taking us along the lower in valley to the east. Finally, we have reached S speed, so it's speed checked and flaps up. Now when slats and flaps are up, let's disarm the ground spoilers and switch the nose lights and the run return of lights off. Let's say we've received the clearance now to flight level 160, so we just dial it in here with the altitude rotary selector and check that 160 is armed in blue on the primary flight display. System display has now automatically changed to the cruise page with some information about the cabin temperature and the cabin pressurization. Also about the fuel used, oil quantity and engine vibrations. Now we're reaching 10,000 feet. That's a good time to switch off the landing lights. Switch off the LS indication. Let's assume we have got the clearance direct to the point Artus now, so just use the direct feature of the flight management system. Now we're inbound Artus, which you can see as an active waypoint on the navigation display. We have already reached now the transition altitude of 11,000 feet. So it's time to set the altimeters to standard, which you do by pushing them. Pulling them. Actually pulling them. And then comparing the two altimeters. We have now received further clearance to climb to flight level 270. We can change the climb mode to open climb by pulling on the altitude rotary switch. Now we are in open climb mode, which is simply maintaining that speed with climb power. That also works if you're not on an actual navigation route, so on a heading, for example. Pushing the button, the altitude button, brings us back to climb mode, manage climb that is. Pulling the vertical speed selector activates the vertical speed mode, and turning the selector adjusts the vertical speed target. Speed mode has now changed from fast climb to speed, and the airplane will hold the indicator airspeed and vertical speed. Now we're back to manage climb and thrust climb. If you get a heading by a heading instruction, just pull the heading knob and turn it to set the desired heading. Automatically, if you're in manage climb at that time, the mode will revert to open climb because you're leaving your programmed route. Now we're turning right to a heading of 080. If you're cleared back to a waypoint of your route, let's say Autos, then you just use the direct to function and automatically nav mode will engage and take you back to the waypoint. Now we can also go back to manage climb. Now it's also time to clear the RadNav page so it can be auto-tuned by the FMC. Let's say we're now cleared to a lower flight level, 200, so that I can show you the altitude acquire or alt star mode. As we are approaching our cleared level, we're using vertical speed, so that our vertical speed is not too high when we're approaching that altitude to avoid TCAS warnings. So we've selected a vertical speed of plus 1000 feet per minute now. By the way, by pushing the vertical speed button, you can perform a level off, so the vertical speed will be set to 0. Switch the seatbelt sign off now. Now when we reach flight level 200, the altitude star mode will engage, which will capture the pre-selected altitude. When it's captured, mode reverts to altitude or cruise altitude. Alt cruise, if that is your selected cruise altitude in the FMC. Let's say we have clearance to climb to a higher level. So let's arm flight level 270 and push the altitude button. And we're in fast climb and manage climb mode again. Now this concludes this tutorial. The next one will be about approach and manual landing. I hope you enjoyed this departure out of Innsbruck Airport, and I wish you a very pleasant flight.